and welcome to this very special evening to celebrate 40 years of walking in the hills and mountains of England and Wales as part of the Hill Walking Club. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Carol, the current chair of the club, and I feel very honoured and privileged to hold this position at this very special occasion. It's very pleasing to see the turnout we have tonight. We've got 108 people here, which I think is quite an achievement. It has to be a sign of how much influence the club has had on all our lives, both walking and socially. And it's a great reflection on the club that so many of you wanted to be here to celebrate this anniversary, and I believe some of you have travelled quite a distance to be here. 40 years, half a lifetime. I'd like to say that 40 years ago I was just a twinkle in my father's eye, but sadly that is not the case. But I was a young student, and having taken our finals, 4 of us embarked on a trip to Snowdon. And being mid-June, we expected summer weather, but this was Wales, so of course it was thick low cloud with zero visibility. Now, I'll probably get a letter from the committee for admitting to this, but we had no map or compass, and I can't remember what I wore, but it was probably jeans and trainers. And I do remember one of the girls ascending in flip-flops. We made it to the summit following the railway and had the most welcome cup of coffee I've ever had in my life. So good that we actually had 2 cups. We then decided to come out into the mist to begin our descent, and that was when that wonderful cloud lifted, a hole appeared, we had the most spectacular views, and that was when my love of the mountains began. But 40 years ago, Ken Smitham had already had the idea of a hill walking club. He'd started the Lucas Fell Walking and Rambling Club in 1974, which began as a club for Lucas employees across the 9 main Midland factory areas. And I believe that members' subs were deducted from their monthly wages in the first year, but it was decided that this arrangement was less than satisfactory. So in February 1975, this club was dissolved and reopened to all comers as the Hill Walking Club. Now, our first chairman was Ray Siddell, and Ken began as walks organiser until he took over the chair in 1977. The club continued to grow, and one month demand was so high that a large coach and a small coach were ordered for a trip to Wales, only to find they had to turn back on the A5 due to heavy snow. 2 coaches have never been requested since. There are countless stories of club life in those years, and you could probably all tell us one. But probably there is none more memorable than leaving the late Patrick Brannan behind at Keele Services on his very first trip with the club. Ken stood down from the chair in 1995 and was replaced by Ken Davis. He recalls the 25th anniversary being celebrated during his time. The guest speaker at the dinner was the editor of the Great Outdoors magazine, who I believe was a friend of the then Secretary Jenny. It was arranged for him to travel down from Scotland and stay at Jenny's the night before the do, but he arrived earlier than she expected, a whole week earlier. Ken Davis resigned in 2001, and Phil Aldridge took the helm, and almost immediately hit difficulties as the countryside was closed to walkers due to the foot and mouth outbreak. But he managed to keep the club walking using canal paths, and the Birmingham Greenway was discovered, joining Watford Gap to Gas Street Basin using parks and canal paths. Phil also started the newsletter, which was handed out on the coach bi-monthly to inform members of events which were coming up. And this was in the very early years of email, which seems hard to imagine now. Our next chairman in 2006 was Arthur Drinkwater. Arthur's chairmanship seemed to pass uneventfully, but I'm sure this was mainly due to his quiet actions in the background. He is very good at pouring oil on troubled waters, and he managed to get some great deals from Bowen's coaches at time of rising fuel costs. It was around this time that the website was created, and what a difference that has made. It is our greatest source of new inquirers, and we now have regular members from as far away as Coventry and Stourport. And of course, with virtually universal use of email, this has made communication so much better. In February 2012, Arthur handed over the reins to myself, and my first year was certainly baptism by fire, with the infamous trip to the Rhinogs in September, dreadful conditions leading to an unprecedented 2-hour late departure from Wales, followed by Bowen's, our coach company for over 30 years, going bust in the October, and then our first mountain rescue call out in December. However, the club continues to thrive. We have had 10 new members sign up in the first 3 months of this year, and I'm pleased to say that we have attracted some younger blood, which is what we need to take us forward to the future and to the next 40 years. So please, I would like you to raise your glasses for a toast to the Hill Walking Club. Okay? To the Hill Walking Club. Okay, now I'm sure this next chap will need very little introduction, but for those of you that don't know him, then I'm handing over the microphone to our founder, Mr. Ken Smitham.
Good evening, everybody. Really, this is what I meant by starting the club. So many people, so many friends. I've got so many friends here tonight. It's wonderful. And this common love of the outdoors and walking has generated a lot of individual friendships and marriages, for that matter. Quite a number of formed relationships through the club, I'm pleased to say, and they seem to last. That's the nice thing. A lot of little groups have set up. There's my Tuesday walking group. I say it's mine, but it's Tony's as well. And there's a Thursday walking group, and then there's the backpacking groups that have been all over the place: Wales, Lake District, Scotland, the Pyrenees, the Alps. You know, we've been all over the place. I'd like I'm only going to be very brief, I'm not as long as Carol. But I want to mention two people. I want to mention, first of all, somebody I've known not for 40 years, but for 50 years. Jeff Spencer, who will be 90 this year. Jeff and I formed an affinity with hills before mountains. This was with hills, because he and I were avid car trialers, and we'd compete against each other. We were both members of Dudley and District Car Club, and we'd both try and get our cars higher up the hill than the other person, right? But then 40 years, that was for about 10 years we did that. 40 years ago, started Hill Walking Club. Well, it was the Lucas Club to start with, and Jeff wanted to join, but he couldn't because it didn't work for Lucas. So that was another spur to start Hill Walking Club. So Jeff and I go back, as I say, about 50 years. So the other person, and this is the end, the other person I would like to mention is my dear wife. Because without Audrey, I wouldn't have done this. So thanks, Aud.